I'm curious what got you into Reason, because you have this kind of, you've traversed this spectrum where I've seen you do a lot of cool ClojureScript stuff. You're very familiar with the JavaScript world. How did you end up working so much in Reason, or contributing so much?
So I've kind of been on a continual quest for the best language, right?
Is the mic on?
Is this, do I have to do something different? It looks on.
Okay.
On? Not on. Let's try this. Okay. So I am always dissatisfied with whatever language I'm working in, I guess. That's one way to put it. Because I have this vision of the future where it's like, oh, computers should be able to take care of this for me. Like, why am I handling this nitty-gritty that, like, computers are so powerful and so fast, like, why can't they just do this? And so if I'm working in Java or Swift, I'm like, these types are getting me down, way too many annotations. If I'm working in JavaScript, it's like, I need some types. And a couple of years ago, I started using Flow with my JavaScript, and I was like, okay, this is better. Like, I can feel more comfortable at this, and we're using it at work at Khan Academy. But then I was reaching the edges of where Flow can help me, and it's like, oh, I have this false sense of security because Flow actually allows a lot of lack of safety. It allows a lot of things in order to fit in well with the JavaScript ecosystem. So I was looking beyond, I was looking at Elm, and frankly, the syntax held me back, where it's like, I don't want to learn new things, which is funny. And then I was talking to Jordan Walk, who started Reason, and he was like, oh, here's this thing, it's OCaml. And I started kind of playing around with it a year and a half ago, but it was still very, very bleeding edge, and I was bleeding a lot. And so, I kind of got off of it, got back interested into it 6 months ago. I was just really happy with the trade-offs that they've chosen, with the places they've come down in immutability versus mutability, kind of syntax, adoption, kind of all these things.
So one phrase I generally hate to hear is this idea of use the best tool for the job. Just use the best tool, right? I think you often need to follow up with this idea of, like, what's the rubric? How do you actually decide what is the best tool for the job? So from someone kind of looking in from the outside, what are the differentiators between, say, Elm and Reason and PureScript and whatnot? Like, how do I decide which of these I actually approach and apply or use in anger?
Some of this has to do with kind of how you feel about programming. And maybe it's a maturity thing. Maybe it's like, oh, I've tried this way and it was terrible. I'm going to try this new way. People who have really been stung by one kind of programming are like, oh, let's go to the opposite. And I think it's great that there are different options where it's like Elm has these properties where it is, as I said in my talk, more strict than Reason, for example, where Elm is immutability all day, no local state, just functions, and that's the best way to do it. Whereas Reason says we're going to have some of the object-oriented, we're going to have some of the local state, and some mutability if that's what you're into. So it's hard to say. It's not like, oh, use Elm if you are doing X. Use Reason if you're doing Y. I can definitely say use Elm or Reason rather than JavaScript. Like, I can be pretty confident in saying JavaScript is the baseline, and we're definitely above that. But it kind of has to do with your philosophy. I don't know, maybe that's not very satisfying.
Well, it may be interesting to ask kind of, in many ways I think they are kind of pointing towards the same goal, right? It's like we're all in a very similar space. We're very, very close together over here in Reason and Elm and whatnot. If you had to guess, if you were forced to on stage, someone asked you this uncomfortable question, what would you say is the difference in the goals between these different languages? So between Elm, PureScript, and Reason in particular.
I think, so PureScript's goal, as I understand it, so this is where I'm least confident, where their goal is be as much like Haskell as possible, but compile to JavaScript well. And Elm's goal, as a contrast from that, is like be inspired by a lot of cool things that Haskell does, but actually be a lot more restricted in the things that the language can do, the power it has, and thereby be a lot easier to learn, a lot more maintainable, a lot safer. But still being very, kind of very true to the Haskell ethic, like the mindset of having purity and just functional based. And then also I think Elm stands out because it's so very well tuned towards making web UIs, where it's like this is what we're going to be super good at, right? If you want to make deep learning or whatever, like Elm is probably not going to be where you turn. But that's a really great thing if what you want is to build a web UI, because you're not going to fall off the path and be like, oh, I accidentally went down this aspect of the language that is better suited for X or Y or Z. No, all of it is well suited toward making web UIs. And then Reason, by contrast, doesn't have that focus, where it's like Reason also wants to be able to write servers and do kind of interesting like performance-based things in addition to being a good compilation target or a compilation source for going to JavaScript and building things on the web. So I think Reason tries to be more general and have kind of multiple paradigms so that people from different sides can get a foothold in, where Elm is very focused. I think that's a testament to Evan's vision for like what programming should be.
So there's some questions about Reason and React Native. I think you mentioned in your talk that there are actually some published apps in the App Store right now that are running on that. Where in that diagram of like hold off, proceed with caution, and it's good to go, would you say that is, if you had to hazard a guess?
I think it's probably pretty decent, actually. I think there are a lot of, you can get a lot of mileage out of React Native. Like if you're building mobile apps, I think the scope is more restricted than if you're just building a general website. And so you won't need that many libraries. It'll be okay if you have to write your own bindings for a couple of things. And so I think it's kind of it's greenish yellow, right? So a little bit past caution, but not quite ready to go.
And then in terms of if I am building an app, say with Reason, Elm has the Elm architecture, right? It's like a very straightforward, here's how we do it approach. Are there similar recommendations for building Reason apps, in particular maybe Reason React apps?
So Reason React has, it's very similar to just writing a React app, but it actually brings in some of the benefits of immutability, some of the benefits of types, such that it's kind of similar to using React and Redux. So you type your action, and so it's more specified the way that state can change. And so that there's no document outlining this is how you do it, but based on the library, it just kind of shows you, oh, this is how you do it, and you can get pretty far.
There were some questions about, you talked that Reason is very general and has lots of different targets that it might go for. Is it possible to write, for example, native like CLI apps, or is it specifically kind of a front-end web UI experience right now?
I have written CLI apps that compile to native machine code, so it's quite possible. There are, like, depending on what you do, you might run into, oh, I wish there was this community library for doing X, because again, we're still kind of at the beginning of building that community, but it's quite possible.
So OCaml is 20, 30 years old at this point. Why do you think that it's just now kind of seeing some interest from companies like Facebook and whatnot, and actually potentially taking a shot at mainstream-ish?
I think OCaml has been, it's been used by companies in the like competitive advantage way, where it's like, oh, we're going to beat our competitors because we're using this better language, and so we're not going to really talk about it, right? We're gonna do our in-house things, and we're going to beat everybody else. And there hasn't yet been somebody who's like, oh, actually, let's try and get everybody on board. And I think that's just Jordan Walk being like, this is awesome. Why aren't more people using it? Let's put a lot of effort into that.
So there's nothing inherently holding it back. It's maybe more of a marketing communication problem?
And like a community, an aspect of the community where the majority of the community was made up of people coming from academia background, people with PhDs who are willing to stomach the cost of, my goodness, this takes 2 days to set up, but then I'm fine. Like, and then I can write my PhD. Whereas, somebody coming from JavaScript is like, if it doesn't work after 10 minutes, I'm going to try something else.
So along those lines of, let's get this to everyone. It's like, I feel that Reason almost has a board-like approach where it goes to some pretty extreme to maybe appeal to JavaScript developers. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that in terms of like the syntax changes that have actually gone in from, say, OCaml to the new syntax that's coming out.
Yeah. So learning Reason syntax, if you've kept up with JavaScript the past 2 years, you should be fine, right? Like all of the changes with coming out of TC39, we're going to add async await, we're going to add X or Y or Z, and if you're familiar with Flow, I think it's at this point it's a very low barrier because it's almost everything that could be made JavaScript-like has been, whereas OCaml is comparatively quite foreign.
You mentioned that syntax was the thing that kind of held you back a little bit with Elm. How important do you feel it is that Reason migrate as close as possible to, say, JavaScript syntax in terms of public adoption?
It's kind of funny because I think syntax is one of those first day things. Like if you are excited enough about Elm that you're willing to spend a day on it, like it's probably fine, and you'll get used to it and you'll keep using it. It'll be great. But I think there are plenty of people that won't give it that first day, where it's like, oh, this is cool, but oh gosh, I'll look at that tomorrow. And so I think it's just it's a weird hurdle, but it's there, and I think it will get I think it'll make a big difference in the number of people that actually give it a try.
Beyond syntax, though, what is it do you think that the Reason community has to do in order to onboard newcomers much more easily? Like, what are we missing that will convert people?
I can probably think of several things, but one thing we need is for new people that are trying it out to tell us what it's missing, because the people in the community have many of us have been working with it for a while, so we're used to like, oh, we already know it doesn't have this, we'll get around to it. But if somebody shows up and it's like, wow, it doesn't have this, like this is kind of this is a deal breaker for me. One of those things is you show up and it's like, oh, I have to write my own bindings for Express. Now there is a library that will wrap Express. It's not terribly fully featured, but you can write a server with it. But you come over and it's like, oh, I'm used to styled components. Can I do that? Oh, I have to try and work out the binding. So I think a big part of what we'll be working on is making it so there just anything you come from in JavaScript, there's a good answer for it in Reason.
How about in terms of documentation? So you mentioned blogs and tutorials and whatnot. What would you like to see the community work on more to make it more accessible for people coming in?
I would love to see a lot of different levels of blog posts where it's like, oh, I'm just coming in and I'm gonna, let's do the first 5 minutes of just getting set up, and then a post where it's like, let's zero in on how do I do an async request. Like I want to talk to a REST API. We're just going to talk about that. And so there's a lot of little things. I wrote a tutorial several months ago that is kind of a long, expecting you have no background, here's how to write a to-do MVC in Reason and React. But but it's a very straight road, and there are lots of branches that people could take where it's like, oh, I don't really care about writing a to-do app, but what if I had this and this and this? And I think just kind of filling in that space is what needs to happen.
If you could maybe speak a little bit about the OCaml type system in general and how it compares to, say, Flow and maybe even something like PureScript or Haskell and whatnot, kind of the trade-offs and where it sits on that spectrum.
Sure. So OCaml's type system is an interesting meld of the functional and the object-oriented. And I think that lends itself well to integrating with JavaScript and being accessible to people coming from a JavaScript background, because there are constructs. The default list construct is immutable, it's persistent, it is a linked list, but then there's also a parallel, which is the array, which is fixed length, but it's mutable, so you can change it, and that at runtime translates to a JavaScript array. So you can use JavaScript array methods if that's what you need to get to move forward. And then on the object side, there's the record, which is kind of the default. It's immutable, it's persistent, that you use to hang on to a bag with names, attribute and value. But then there's an object, which again is a JavaScript object, and it is kind of more object-oriented. It isn't as restricted. You don't have to spend as much time writing out type definitions if you're using the objects. And yeah, there's a lot of other things that I'd probably need a whiteboard, and maybe we'll cover this in the workshop tomorrow. But one of the coolest things about the type system, I think, is many type systems have some types, which is where it's like this is type animal, and it could be a dog with an integer, which is the number of legs, and it could be a cat with an integer, which is the number of ears. It could be one of these many things. And OCaml has that, but it also has what we call variant, which is the same thing except much more flexible. So it's not tied to a specific module that owns it. Anybody can declare it, and it's kind of, if you're familiar with Clojure's keywords, where it's like you just give it this keyword and you can get the thing out of it, versus namespace keywords, where it's like, oh, this is specific to this file. That's kind of the parallel I draw for variants versus the sum types.
And just to ask it explicitly, does it have union types?
It does.
There we go.
So that's when I say sum, I mean union.
Yeah. Just want to make sure I address it specifically. How would you pitch reason to someone who is coming from ClojureScript, for example, someone who is used to a REPL-based development, very, very fast feedback? What is going to pull me out of that happy space and motivate me to go over to reason? So, in as much as reason compiles to JavaScript, we have REPLs. They're not nearly as good as Clojure and ClojureScript because they're kind of built from the ground up to support that. But the other thing that keeps making me happy about working in Reason is that the compiler is so fast. So you don't need to do all of these kind of tricks to get fast reload time. Where if you're working in a large ClojureScript project and line takes a couple of seconds to reload your project, ClojureScript does it in milliseconds. And so I think it has some things to offer, even though maybe the REPL story isn't as good. So you've talked a lot about targeting browsers and compiling to JavaScript and whatnot. In your talk, I think you mentioned that you can go other places as well. What does that look like right now? Is that kind of a be careful area, or is it like there's enough there that I could get started as a JavaScript developer exploring native development using Reason?
So the current status of native development is very tied to the OCaml ecosystem. If you're going to be writing a web server targeting native compilation, you're going to be interacting with OCaml libraries, which historically are quite poorly documented. And you're going to be reading tutorials that are written in the OCaml syntax instead of the reason syntax. So depending on how willing you are to deal with that, you can definitely go for it. But I think over the course of the next little bit, we're going to get a lot more kind of reason-focused documentation and better support onboarding people into that.
So you mentioned, the idea that we're moving the syntax as close as possible to JavaScript, make the familiar things familiar. But this comes at a cost that, everything that exists and is documented in OCaml now, I have to do some translation in my head. How familiar with OCaml and OCaml syntax should I be if I really want to be productive in Reason?
So there is a Chrome extension that'll actually look, you click the button and it'll find any OCaml code on the page and translate it to Reason, which is super fun. So that's one thing to ease the barrier. But also, learning a new syntax isn't that bad. Again, it's kind of a first day thing. So as things stand, I think we have enough Reason documentation and enough of the OCaml documentation translated to Reason that you don't really need to dig into it. But if you come across OCaml, I don't think it'll prove too strong of a barrier.
Do you think, I think right now the OCaml community and the Reason community are quite distinct. There's actually very little overlap between the two of them, right? You have, as you said, kind of academics and powerhouse companies that use it as competitive example or advantage. And then on the Reason side, we're kind of starting from web-based JavaScript developers and whatnot. Do you see these two communities coming together in the future? Do you think that given that Reason can go to all these places and compile to native and whatnot, that this is the bridge that gets JavaScript developers over there, or do you think that they will remain separate?
I think they're likely to remain separate. The OCaml community have a thing that is working well for them, and they have made choices. They have come down along the spectrum. Like this is what we care about when we're looking at a package manager. This is what we care about when we're looking at kind of the compiler ecosystem, the build tools. And I think those are probably different things than the Reason community cares about, the people that are coming from JavaScript. So I think they'll probably remain separate, and I think that's fine.
So Elm has Evan and Clojure has Rich Hickey. Is there an equivalent in the OCaml and Reason world? Is it just Jordan? Or is it much more maybe panel driven? Is there a lot more people kind of getting input into this language?
I think Cheng's probably the public face of Reason. He's given some very popular talks about kind of almost Rich Hickey-esque talks where it's like we're going to think deeply about languages. But as far as how the language develops, whether there is a BDFL that calls all the shots, I think it's more panel-based. I think it's more we're going to kind of see what our community thinks and react to it.
An interesting question about maybe someone coming from Haskell. So monads are kind of the first word out of Haskell's mouth oftentimes. How do I handle monads? Are they first-class citizens in Reason? If I want to do I/O, is that a explicitly captured in type thing, or is it kind of much more free-for-all, maybe JavaScript style?
You can easily write monadically. So if you're doing async, for example, and you want to make a special syntax for handling a promise as it appears monadically, you can do that. And there are plenty of people, especially coming from the OCaml side of things, that are like, yes, we have our bind, we have our map, we have these monadic rules. I think one of my goals with Reason is to kind of make it less in your face. And I'm working on a syntax change that will add async and await to Reason, so that you don't have to think about let and bind, what's return monadically. It's just kind of appealing to the things that are already established in the JavaScript community.
So it sounds like Reason then is very kind of intentionally eschewing this idea of like a first-class monadic syntax and sugary support?
We haven't focused on it, but because of our OCaml heritage and the fact that we're built on OCaml, it's there, right? So it's not like you're any less able to use monads, but it's not a focus like, oh, hey, you're coming to Reason, let's talk about monads.
So, you know, there's this sales pitch that, all right, I can compile to the front end with Reason, and it can go to the back end, and it can go to native on mobile and whatnot. Is it really there in terms of being able to share, for example, logic between all these different clients?
I have written an example app where the front end and the back end are both written in Reason, and the back end is compiled to native, the front end is compiled to JavaScript, and it shares a lot of the logic and also the type definitions of the API. So as far as that goes, there's a good story for it. If we're compiling to, for example, iOS native or Android JDK stuff, that is very much experimental at the moment.
How useful do you find it to be able to share the type definitions between the server and the client? Has it actually helped you, or is it kind of like a that might be nice kind of feature?
I think it gives me a lot of peace of mind where I don't have to be maintaining two separate type definitions. At work, we've got an Android app and an iOS app and React Native on both of them, but they started out without React Native. So there's a binding layer where it's like, oh, native has to send some data to JavaScript. And so we've got the types in Flow, and we've got the types in Swift, and the types in Java. And we have to make sure, oh, like, we change it here, we have to change it at these other two places. And that is tedious and error prone, and we have shipped bugs because we forgot to align things well. And so I think it really gives you a lot of peace of mind to have just one set.
All right, I think that's probably about it for our time. Thank you very much. Please thank Jared.
Thank you.